Dr. Kextul knelt in the red dust of Morthak Prime, carefully brushing away millions of years of cosmic debris from the stone tablet buried beneath his feet. The dead planet stretched endlessly around him, its surface cracked and barren under the light of a dying star. This was the 17th dead world he had visited in the past 2 years, and each one told the same terrifying story. The symbols carved into the ancient stone were crude, but unmistakable. They matched perfectly with warnings he had found scattered across the galaxy's forgotten corners. Every extinct civilization had left behind the same desperate message, carved with what must have been their final breaths of hope. "Beware the species that calls itself human," the translation read on his scanner. "They consume worlds not through conquest, but through integration." Kextul had spent decades studying dead civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for this pattern. These weren't random warnings about mythical monsters or ancient gods. These were specific, detailed accounts of a real species that had somehow touched every corner of the galaxy throughout history. The Zefhari tablets spoke of traders who arrived with gifts and knowledge. The Morthak inscriptions described helpful neighbors who solved problems and offered friendship. The Kelvaxian ruins told of wise advisors who guided their leaders through difficult times. But every story ended the same way, with the civilization's mysterious disappearance and humans moving on to the next target. What made these warnings even more chilling was their consistency across time and space. Civilizations separated by thousands of light years and millions of years had all encountered the same species following the same pattern. It was impossible, yet the evidence lay scattered across 17 dead worlds. When Kextul returned to the massive council station orbiting Nexus Prime, he immediately requested an audience with Chancellor Vorthak. The six-armed leader of the Galactic Council listened with barely concealed impatience as the archaeologist presented his findings on the main display screen. "Look at these patterns," Kextul said, pointing to the holographic images of the ancient warnings. "Every civilization describes the same approach, the same methods, the same outcome. This isn't coincidence. This is evidence of a systematic expansion strategy that has been operating for millions of years." Chancellor Vorthak waved all 6 of his arms dismissively, his purple skin flushing with annoyance. "Primitive mythology," he declared in his booming voice. "These backwater species probably destroyed themselves through war or plague, then blamed their failures on imaginary enemies. Do you really expect the Council to waste resources investigating fairy tales carved by dead aliens?" The other Council members nodded in agreement, their various alien features showing similar skepticism. To them, Kextul's discovery was nothing more than an interesting historical footnote. The superstitions of extinct primitives who had failed to achieve true civilization. Despite the rejection, Kextul couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was approaching. He filed his complete research in the Council's vast digital archives, knowing that the warnings would be buried under countless layers of bureaucratic data storage. The information would remain there, accessible but forgotten, while the galaxy continued its peaceful expansion. Only one person believed in the significance of the ancient warnings. In his small research lab on the outer rim of Council space, Kextul continued translating the remaining fragments of text, working late into the night cycles. He had become obsessed with understanding the complete story, driven by a growing certainty that the species called human was still out there, following the same ancient pattern that had consumed 17 previous civilizations. The warnings spoke of integration, not conquest. That word haunted Kextul's dreams as he worked tirelessly to decode the final pieces of the puzzle. The sleek human diplomatic vessel glided silently through the energy barriers surrounding Station Nexus 7, the most important meeting place in the known galaxy. Inside the ship's main corridor, Ambassador Gina adjusted her simple grey jacket one final time and checked her reflection in the polished metal wall. Everything had to be perfect for this moment. Humanity's entire future depended on making exactly the right impression. Her small team of advisors walked quietly behind her as the airlock doors hissed open. The station's artificial atmosphere felt slightly thicker than Earth normal, carrying the mixed scents of dozens of alien species who called this massive structure home. Gina had spent months preparing for this encounter, studying every detail of galactic diplomacy and council protocol. The receiving chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate the wildly different body types of the galaxy's many species. Crystalline beings from the ice worlds stood next to towering plant-like creatures from jungle planets. Floating gas-based life forms drifted near the ceiling, while heavy gravity species occupied reinforced platforms on the floor. But Gina focused, her attention on the raised platform where the Council's most important members waited. Chancellor Vorthak dominated the center position, his 6 arms folded in the traditional greeting pose. His purple skin gleamed under the chamber's artificial lighting, and his 4 eyes studied the approaching humans with casual interest. "Honored Council members," Gina began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. She had practiced this speech hundreds of times, making sure every word conveyed exactly the right message. "Humanity comes before you today, seeking peaceful cooperation and mutually beneficial trade partnerships. We are a young species, eager to learn from the wisdom of our galactic neighbors." The council members leaned forward slightly, their various sensory organs focusing on this new arrival. Gina continued with carefully measured words. "We offer our knowledge of agricultural techniques that have allowed us to grow food in hostile environments. Our mineral extraction methods have proven efficient on worlds with limited resources. In exchange, we hope to gain access to the scientific advancement that has made galactic civilization possible." Chancellor Vorthak's expression remained neutral, but Gina could see the pleased glances exchanged between other council members. This was exactly what they wanted to hear. Another minor species offering tribute in exchange for the privilege of joining galactic society. The humans appeared to understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy. "Your species shows appropriate respect for established order," Chancellor Vorthak declared, his booming voice filling the chamber. "The Council appreciates civilizations that recognize the value of cooperation over conflict." Behind Gina, Captain Wren stood quietly at attention. In his simple military uniform, his ship's computers had already transmitted detailed survey data to the Council's databases. Star charts showing humanity's careful expansion into a handful of nearby solar systems, population statistics indicating steady but unremarkable growth, rates and resource assessments that painted humans as competent but not exceptional. The data showed exactly what the Council expected to see. Humanity controlled 12 star systems, with a total population of 8 billion people spread across 15 worlds. Their technology level was adequate for basic space travel and planetary colonization, but nothing that would threaten established galactic powers. Their military consisted of lightly armed patrol ships designed for system defense rather than conquest. Chancellor Vorthak barely tried to hide his boredom as the formal ceremonies continued. The ritual presentations, ceremonial exchanges of gifts, and lengthy speeches about mutual cooperation were just bureaucratic requirements that had to be completed before humanity could join the thousands of other minor species paying tribute to the Council. The voting process took less than an hour. Council members approved humanity's provisional membership with casual efficiency, filing the necessary paperwork and assigning them a minor position in the galactic hierarchy. The humans would be allowed to participate in basic trade networks, access standard technological exchanges, and enjoy protection under Council law. As Gina left the chamber with her small delegation, she maintained her expression of grateful humility. The performance had been flawless. Humanity had been accepted as just another unremarkable species seeking the benefits of galactic civilization. The Council had no idea that they had just welcomed their future masters into the heart of their empire. Intelligence Officer Thexan sat in his dimly lit office aboard the Council's surveillance station, surrounded by dozens of holographic displays showing data streams from across the galaxy. His compound eyes could process multiple information feeds simultaneously, a trait that made his species excellent at intelligence work. What he was seeing in the human sector reports made his chitinous exoskeleton click with nervous energy. 3. Cycles had passed since humanity's admission to the Council, and something was very wrong with their expansion patterns. Thexan had been monitoring new member species for over 20 years, and he had never encountered discrepancies like these. The numbers simply didn't add up. no matter how many times he ran the calculations. According to the original survey data Captain Wren had provided, humanity controlled 12 star systems with 15 colonized worlds. Their population stood at 8 billion individuals, growing at a modest 2% annually. But Thexan's deep space monitoring stations were detecting human communication signals from locations that shouldn't exist. He pulled up the real-time surveillance map, his four arms working multiple control interfaces simultaneously. Red dots appeared across the display, each representing a detected human settlement. Thexan counted them twice, then activated his backup sensors to verify the readings. The results were undeniable. Humans now occupied 17 different worlds, across 4 separate sectors of Council space. This wasn't just rapid expansion, this was impossible expansion. Even the most aggressive colonization programs required years of preparation, resource allocation, and terraforming before settlements could be established. Yet humans had somehow tripled their territorial holdings in less than 2 standard years. But the location of these settlements was even more disturbing than their number. Thexan accessed the planetary classification databases and cross-referenced them with the detected human colonies. His mandibles clicked in disbelief as the data processed. Kepler 442c was a desert world with surface temperatures that regularly exceeded 60 degrees Celsius. Council terraforming experts had classified it as requiring at least 30 years of atmospheric processing before basic agriculture would be possible. Yet Thexan's sensors detected massive agricultural complexes covering hundreds of square kilometers, with crop yields that exceeded anything seen on properly terraformed worlds. Proxima Centauri 7 was an ice planet, with surface temperatures averaging -40 degrees Celsius. The Council had deemed it suitable only for automated mining operations that could function in extreme cold. But thermal imaging showed bustling human settlements, with populations in the tens of thousands, along with mining operations that were extracting resources at rates that should have been impossible in such harsh conditions. Gliese 667cc was a high-gravity world where most species required mechanical assistance just to walk. The atmospheric composition contained toxic levels of methane that would kill most oxygen-breathing species within hours. Yet human settlements there were thriving, with no evidence of the massive life support systems that should have been necessary. For survival, Thexan had spent decades studying alien colonization patterns, and he knew that environmental adaptation of this scale typically took generations of genetic modification or centuries of technological development. Humans had somehow accomplished in months what other species needed decades to achieve. The intelligence officer decided to request official clarification. He sent a formal communication to Ambassador Gina, asking for updated population figures and territorial maps. The request was perfectly routine. The Council regularly monitored member species to ensure compliance with expansion treaties and resource allocation agreements. Gina's response arrived within hours, accompanied by detailed charts and statistical reports. The data she provided was professionally formatted and appeared completely legitimate. According to her figures, humanity still controlled only 12 star systems with a total population of 8.2 billion individuals, exactly what would be expected, with normal growth rates. But Thexan's surveillance networks were detecting human settlements that didn't appear anywhere in Gina's official reports. Either his intelligence apparatus had developed systematic failures across multiple sectors, or humanity was deliberately concealing the true scope of their expansion. The veteran intelligence officer had encountered deception before during his long career. He had seen species attempt to hide military buildups, conceal resource discoveries, or underreport population figures to avoid taxation. But he had never encountered systematic misdirection executed with such precision and completeness. This wasn't simple rule-breaking or bureaucratic corner-cutting. This was evidence of a coordinated strategy designed to hide humanity's true capabilities from the Council. The question was whether this deception represented preparation for rebellion or something far more sophisticated and dangerous. Director Minho stood in his gleaming office overlooking the bustling Rigelian industrial complex, watching massive cargo ships load precious metals that would soon travel to dozens of worlds across the galaxy. 18 months ago, this facility hadn't existed. Now it was the backbone of the entire Rigelian manufacturing economy, and everyone from factory workers to planetary governors depended on his company's operations. The transformation had been remarkable. When Minho first arrived on Rigel 7 with his small team of human engineers, the local mining industry was struggling with outdated extraction methods and dwindling profits. Established suppliers had controlled the rare earth element market for over 3 centuries, charging premium prices while delivering inconsistent quality and unreliable shipping schedules. Minho had approached the Rigelian Trade Council with a simple proposal. His company could provide the same rare earth elements at 20% below current market rates, with guaranteed delivery schedules and quality standards that exceeded anything currently available. The only requirement was exclusive access to several abandoned mining sites that other companies had deemed unprofitable. The Rigelians had been skeptical at first. How could a newcomer from an unknown species accomplish what established galactic corporations couldn't? But Minho's demonstration had convinced them. His teams used innovative extraction techniques that recovered valuable materials from ore deposits that others had written off as worthless. Their processing methods were cleaner, faster, and more efficient than anything the galaxy had seen before. Within 6 months, Rigelian manufacturers were saving millions of credits annually by switching to human suppliers. Within 12 months, they couldn't imagine operating without Minho's company. The cost savings had allowed them to expand production, hire more workers, and compete in markets that had previously been closed to them. But Minho's success on Rigel 7 was just one example of a pattern spreading across council space. On Kepler Prime, Sujin had revolutionized agriculture by introducing crop varieties that grew faster and produced higher yields than anything previously known. Her agricultural cooperatives now fed 3 dozen worlds, and planetary governments relied on her expertise to prevent food shortages during difficult growing seasons. Taeyang's shipping networks had become equally indispensable. His cargo fleets offered faster delivery times and lower costs than established galactic freight companies. Major corporations had started restructuring their entire supply chains around his routes, knowing that his ships would arrive on schedule, regardless of political tensions or space weather conditions. Meanwhile, Haiwan's research facilities were solving scientific problems that had puzzled alien researchers for generations. Her teams developed new materials that were stronger and lighter than anything previously created. They found solutions to manufacturing challenges that had limited industrial growth for decades. Universities and corporations across the galaxy were eager to partner with her laboratories. What made these achievements even more impressive was their apparent legitimacy. Every human enterprise maintained perfect compliance records with council regulations. They paid their taxes on time, followed environmental protection standards, and treated their alien employees fairly. Government inspectors found no violations, no shortcuts, and no evidence of illegal practices. Yet something deeply unsettling was happening to the galactic economy. Council economists started noticing disturbing patterns in their quarterly reports. Alien businesses that had operated successfully for centuries were suddenly failing as customers switched to cheaper human alternatives. Entire economic sectors were becoming dependent on human suppliers, creating vulnerabilities that hadn't existed before. Trade routes that had carried goods between alien worlds for millennia were being abandoned as cargo ships redirected to accommodate human operations. Traditional partnerships between alien corporations were dissolving as companies found it more profitable to work with human suppliers instead of their long-time allies. The Covaxian Steel Consortium, which had dominated metal production for 800 years, filed for bankruptcy after losing 90% of their customers to human competitors. The Zephyrian Transport Guild, once the galaxy's largest shipping organization, was forced to merge with smaller companies after Taeyang's networks captured their most profitable routes. When concerned alien business leaders demanded explanations from council officials, the humans always provided reasonable answers. Market forces were simply favoring more efficient operations. Competition was healthy for the galactic economy. Innovation should be rewarded, not punished. Their success was benefiting everyone by lowering costs and improving quality across multiple industries. Ambassador Gina attended economic summit meetings where she listened patiently to complaints about unfair competition and market manipulation. She always responded with charts and statistics showing how human businesses were creating jobs, reducing prices, and driving technological advancement. The data was compelling, and her arguments were logical. But underneath the reasonable explanations and legitimate business practices, something fundamental was shifting. The galaxy's economic foundation was quietly being rebuilt around human operations, creating dependencies that ran deeper than simple market competition. Dr. Kextool's clawed hands shook violently as he stared at the final translation appearing on his computer screen. After months of painstaking work deciphering the ancient Zefhari script, the last piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. The dead civilization's final records weren't the desperate ravings of a dying species. They were a detailed warning, left for future generations who might encounter the same fate. The Zefhari had been one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, masters of quantum physics and interdimensional travel. Their cities had spanned multiple star systems. Their technology had seemed almost magical to other species, and their culture had flourished for over 10,000 years. Yet somehow, they had vanished completely, leaving behind only ruins and cryptic warnings carved in stone. Now Kextool understood why. The final tablets told a story that sent ice through his veins as he read each translated line. The species the Zefhari called the Integrators had arrived exactly as the humans had arrived at the Council, as friendly merchants and curious scholars seeking knowledge and trade opportunities. They came to us with gifts of knowledge and offers of friendship, the ancient text revealed. Their ways seemed strange but harmless. They learned our language quickly and adapted to our customs with remarkable ease. We welcomed them as brothers, sharing our science and our culture freely. The translation continued, describing a process that had taken place over several generations. The Integrators had established trading posts throughout Zefhari space, offering valuable resources and innovative technologies. Their research facilities had collaborated with Zefhari scientists, solving problems and advancing knowledge in ways that benefited everyone. But gradually, something had changed. Zefhari children grew up learning the Integrator language alongside their own. Young Zefhari found Integrator culture more exciting than their traditional ways. Integrator advisors became essential to government operations, their expertise valued above that of native officials. By the time we realized our mistake, the transformation was complete, the final passages read. Our children spoke their language better than our own. Our leaders consulted their advisors on every decision. Our economy depended entirely on their systems. They had become us and we had become them, but the Union served only their expansion. The Zefhari had tried to resist once they understood what was happening, but it was already too late. The Integrators controlled too much of their infrastructure, influenced too many of their people, and had become too deeply embedded in their society. Any attempt to remove them would have caused complete collapse. Instead of fighting, the Zefhari had simply faded away. Their distinct culture disappeared as it merged with that of the Integrators. Their technology became part of the Integrator knowledge base. Their people became part of the expanding Integrator civilization. Within a few generations, nothing remained that was uniquely Zefhari. Kextool stumbled from his research chamber, clutching his datapad against his chest as he raced through the council station's corridors. Other beings moved aside as the archaeologist pushed past them, his usually calm demeanor replaced by desperate urgency. He had to reach Chancellor Vorthak before it was too late. The Chancellor's chambers were heavily guarded, but Kextool's position gave him access to the highest levels of council leadership. He burst through the ornate doors without waiting for permission, startling the six-armed leader who was reviewing economic reports from the human sectors. "Chancellor, you must listen to me," Kextool gasped, activating his datapad with trembling claws. The warnings weren't mythology, they were historical records. The humans, they're following the exact same pattern that destroyed 17 other civilizations across the galaxy. Vorthak's 4 eyes focused on the translation as Kextul read the ancient Zephari account aloud. With each word, the Chancellor's purple skin grew paler. The economic reports scattered across his desk suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. The human trading companies, research facilities, and advisory services weren't just successful businesses. They were tools of systematic, cultural conquest. They don't hide their nature, Kextul explained, his voice growing stronger as the implications became clear. They simply follow a strategy so patient and subtle that their targets never recognize the threat until integration is complete. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the humans have become so essential to daily life that removing them would cause civilization to collapse. Chancellor Vorthak stared at the translations in horror, finally understanding that the Council hadn't welcomed a minor species seeking membership. They had invited their future conquerors into the heart of galactic civilization, and the conquest had already begun. The ancient warnings had been trying to save them, but no one had listened until it was already too late. The Council's emergency. Assembly Hall had never seen such chaos. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive chamber, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, roars, and electronic signals that the translation systems struggled to process. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across the curved walls as Chancellor Vorthak called for order with increasingly desperate gestures of his 6 arms. Intelligence reports flooded in from across the galaxy, each one more alarming than the last. The human presence had grown far beyond anything the Council had imagined possible. What they had believed to be a small collection of colonies had somehow expanded into a network spanning over 300 worlds across dozens of sectors. The Rigelian trade representative stood at his speaking platform, his crystalline form glowing with agitation. "The humans control 60% of our rare earth element supply," he announced, his voice resonating through the chamber's acoustics. "Their mining operations have become so essential that shutting them down would collapse our entire manufacturing sector within weeks." Similar reports came from representatives across the galaxy. The Kovaxian military had become dependent on human-supplied weapon components. The Zephyrian agricultural worlds relied on human crop varieties to feed their populations. The Altarian research institutes had integrated human technology so deeply into their work that removing them would set back scientific progress by decades. But the most disturbing discoveries came from the Council's own internal security review. Human research facilities had been granted access to classified technologies from dozens of member species. Their cultural exchange programs had placed human advisors in government positions across multiple worlds. Their educational initiatives had influenced the development of an entire generation of alien children. The Proximan Defense Minister activated his holographic display, showing trade route maps that revealed the true scope of human economic integration. "Look at these shipping patterns," he said, his tentacles gesturing at the glowing pathways. "Human cargo networks now handle 40% of all interstellar commerce. Their logistics systems have become so central to galactic trade that disrupting them would cause economic collapse across multiple sectors." Chancellor Vorthak felt a growing sense of dread as the reports continued. Every attempt to map human influence revealed new layers of integration that had somehow escaped official notice. They weren't just trading partners or research collaborators. They had become the invisible foundation supporting galactic civilization itself. The session was interrupted when Ambassador Gina entered the chamber, escorted by 2 Council security officers. She walked calmly to the designated seating area, her simple human clothing contrasting sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other representatives. Despite the accusations flying around the room, her expression remained professionally neutral. "Ambassador?" Chancellor Vorthak's voice boomed across the chamber. "The Council demands an explanation for these deceptions. Your species has violated the terms of your membership agreement by concealing the true scope of your expansion." Gina stood slowly, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "Before I respond to these charges, I would like to review the archaeological evidence that prompted this emergency session. Dr. Kextool's research appears to be quite comprehensive. The request seemed reasonable, so the Council provided her with access to the complete database of ancient warnings. For several hours, the Assembly waited in tense silence as Gina studied the translations from 17 extinct civilizations. Her human team of advisors remained seated, showing no signs of concern or surprise at the accusations being leveled against their species. When Gina finally returned to address the Council, her demeanor had shifted subtly. The diplomatic mask of humility and cooperation had been replaced by something more direct and honest. She stood at the central speaking platform, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the massive chamber. "These warnings describe exactly what we've been doing," she said calmly, her words sending a chill through the assembled representatives. The Zephari, the Morthak, the Kelvaxians, they all encountered the same expansion pattern that we've been following throughout galactic history. Did you expect us to deny it? The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and demands for explanation. But Gina continued speaking, her voice cutting through the chaos with unnerving composure. "The question isn't whether we've been following this strategy. The question is why you thought you could stop it now that you've discovered it." The terrible truth was becoming clear. The Council hadn't just failed to recognize the human threat, they had actively facilitated it by welcoming humanity into galactic civilization. The integration was already so complete that any attempt to remove human influence would cause the collapse of the very systems that kept billions of beings alive and prosperous. They were trapped in a web of their own making, and the spider had just revealed itself. Ambassador Gina moved to the center of the Council chamber, her calm presence commanding attention from every alien representative in the vast room. The accusations and angry shouts had died down to whispers as beings across the galaxy waited to hear humanity's true intentions revealed for the first time. "You want to understand what humanity has been doing," she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. "The answer is quite simple. We learned thousands of years ago that military conquest is the most inefficient way to expand across the stars. Force creates resistance, rebellion and endless cycles of violence that drain resources and destroy the very civilizations you're trying to control." She gestured toward the holographic projectors built into the chamber floor. With a simple command, the entire room was filled with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, showing the slow but steady progression of human influence across thousands of star systems over millennia. "Integration creates cooperation," Gina continued, pointing to various regions of the galactic map. "When you become essential to another species' survival and prosperity, they welcome your presence rather than fighting against it. When you solve their problems and improve their lives, they invite you to become part of their society rather than viewing you as an invader." The timeline showed humanity's expansion beginning over 2,000 years ago, not from Earth as the Council had assumed, but from dozens of worlds scattered across the galaxy's outer rim. Each point of light represented a civilization that had encountered humans, integrated with them, and eventually become part of the expanding human network. "We don't seek to destroy other civilizations," Gina explained, her tone carrying genuine conviction. "Destruction is wasteful. Why eliminate the knowledge, culture, and capabilities of other species when you can incorporate them into your own society? Every civilization we encounter makes us stronger, more diverse, and more capable." Captain Wren stepped forward from the human delegation, activating his own data displays to support Gina's presentation. Charts and statistics filled the air around him, showing detailed analyses of every world where humans had established significant presence. "Look at the evidence," he said, his military bearing lending authority to his words. "On Rigel 7, average income has increased by 40% since human mining operations began. Unemployment has dropped to record lows. Healthcare quality has improved dramatically as human medical techniques were shared with local practitioners." Similar data appeared for dozens of other worlds. Kepler Prime had eliminated food shortages within 2 years of adopting human agricultural methods. Proxima Centauri 9 had reduced crime rates by 60% after implementing human conflict resolution programs. Altair 4 had made scientific breakthroughs that had eluded their researchers for centuries after partnering with human laboratories. Every species we encounter benefits from the partnership, Gina continued, walking slowly around the chamber as she spoke. Their populations grow more prosperous as we share resources and knowledge. Their technologies advance faster as our research methods complement their existing capabilities. Their cultures endure and adapt, incorporating the best elements of human civilization while maintaining their unique characteristics. The holographic displays showed cultural festivals on integrated worlds where human and alien traditions had blended into new celebrations that honored both heritages, educational systems where human and alien knowledge were taught together, creating generations of beings who were equally comfortable with multiple ways of thinking and problem-solving. The only thing that changes, Gina said, stopping in front of Chancellor Vorthak's platform, is the ultimate direction of their development. Instead of growing independently in isolation, they grow as part of a larger, human-led civilization that spans the galaxy. The data was overwhelming and undeniable. Crime rates, economic indicators, technological advancement, educational achievement, life expectancy, and quality of life measurements all showed dramatic improvements on worlds with significant human presence. Even more striking, these improvements appeared to be permanent, continuing for generations after initial human integration. But perhaps most disturbing to the council members was the realization that the humans genuinely believed in what they were doing. This wasn't cynical exploitation or ruthless conquest disguised as cooperation. Gina and her colleagues truly believed that human expansion served the greater good of galactic civilization. "You're describing the elimination of independent species," Chancellor Vorthak said, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "Cultural absorption on a galactic scale." Gina nodded calmly. "We're describing the evolution of galactic civilization into something greater than the sum of its parts. Every species that joins us becomes part of humanity, but humanity also becomes part of them. We grow stronger together than any of us could grow apart." The Council faced an opponent who wasn't motivated by greed, hatred, or the desire for power. They were dealing with a species that had convinced itself that galactic conquest was actually galactic salvation. The most dangerous enemy of all, one who believed they were the hero of the story. Admiral Kextherm stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive Kavaxian dreadnought, Vengeance of Stars, watching the final preparations for what he believed would be a swift and decisive victory. His fleet consisted of over 300 warships, representing 6 different species, all united in their determination to stop human expansion before it was too late. The plan was simple and seemingly foolproof. Human colonies in the Beta sector appeared to be lightly defended civilian settlements, protected only by small patrol craft and basic defensive satellites. Intelligence reports suggested that the humans had focused entirely on economic expansion, neglecting military preparations in favor of trade networks and research facilities. "All strike groups report ready for attack," his communications officer announced, her voice filled with the confidence that came from overwhelming numerical superiority. The combined fleet represented the largest military force assembled in the galaxy for over a century, bringing together species that had rarely cooperated in the past. Kextherm activated the fleet-wide communication system, his words carrying to every ship in the massive armada. "Today we strike a blow for the independence of all galactic civilizations. The humans have deceived us with their peaceful facade, but we will show them that free species will not submit to integration." The first target was the human agricultural complex on Kepler 442c, a desert world that had been transformed into a food production center, serving dozens of nearby systems. Long-range sensors showed vast farming installations, processing centers, and what appeared to be civilian transport, ships moving cargo between the planet and orbital stations. As the Kavaxian fleet approached, something unexpected happened. The civilian cargo ships began changing configuration, their hulls opening to reveal weapon systems that shouldn't have existed on commercial vessels. Defensive satellites that had appeared to be simple communication relays suddenly activated, advanced shield generators and energy cannons. "What in the void is happening?" Kextherm demanded as his tactical displays lit up with threat indicators. The agricultural complex was transforming before his eyes, revealing itself to be a heavily fortified military installation disguised as a farming operation. The human response was unlike anything the Kavaxian military had encountered. Instead of launching desperate counterattacks or attempting to flee, the defenders seemed to be following a carefully planned defensive strategy that had been prepared years in advance. Research stations that had been conducting agricultural experiments suddenly deployed swarms of automated defense drones, each one equipped with weapons technology that exceeded anything in the Council's databases. But it was the human tactical coordination that truly stunned the attacking force. Every move the Kavaxians made was anticipated and countered before it could be fully executed. When Admiral Kextherm ordered his heavy cruisers to concentrate fire on the planetary defense grid, the humans had already repositioned their mobile platforms to cover the vulnerable areas. The defensive coordinator appeared to be a human named Minsu, whose tactical communications the Kavaxians intercepted and decoded. Listening to his calm, precise instructions, Kextherm realized that the human commander was anticipating each attack pattern before the Kavaxian fleet could deploy it. Strike Group Alpha, redirect to Defensive Posture 7, Minsu's voice came through the intercepted transmissions. Strike Group Beta, prepare for flanking maneuver in 30 seconds. Strike Group Gamma, activate electronic countermeasures now. The human defensive doctrine was methodical rather than vicious. Instead of trying to destroy the attacking ships, they systematically disabled weapon systems, communication arrays, and propulsion units. Kavaxian vessels found themselves captured rather than destroyed, their crews taken prisoner rather than killed. Advanced human technologies that had been hidden within seemingly innocent civilian infrastructure began revealing themselves across the battlefield. Mining equipment transformed into siege weapons. Transport ships deployed boarding parties equipped with armor and weapons that surpassed anything the Council's military used. Research laboratories launched electronic warfare attacks that crippled Kavaxian command and control systems. The most disturbing aspect of the human defense was its restraint. Despite having the capability to annihilate the attacking fleet, the humans chose to minimize casualties while demonstrating their overwhelming tactical superiority. They could have turned the battle into a massacre, but instead they treated it as a teaching exercise. After 6 hours of one-sided combat, Admiral Kextherm was forced to order a general retreat. His fleet had been reduced to less than half its original strength, with dozens of ships captured and hundreds of others disabled. The human colonies remained untouched, their defensive capabilities barely tested by the assault. As the surviving Kavaxian ships limped back toward Council space, they carried detailed recordings of human military technology that terrified every military advisor who reviewed them. The humans hadn't just prepared for this scenario. They had been planning for it since their first contact with galactic civilization. The peaceful merchants and helpful researchers had been soldiers all along, waiting patiently for someone to make the mistake of attacking them. The galaxy's greatest military powers had just learned that humanity's most dangerous weapon wasn't their technology or their strategy, it was their patience. The Grand Assembly Hall looked exactly the same as it had during humanity's first diplomatic contact, but everything else had changed beyond recognition. The same curved walls, the same elevated platforms, the same holographic displays. Yet the beings occupying those seats now served a fundamentally different organization with a fundamentally different purpose. Chancellor Gina stood at the central podium where she had once humbly requested humanity's admission to galactic civilization. Now she wore the formal robes of the Terran Federation's highest office, the morning light streaming through the massive viewport behind her, casting long shadows across the chamber floor. The transformation had been remarkably peaceful. No armies had marched across alien worlds. No governments had been overthrown by force. Instead, the change had come through the most democratic process possible, a galaxy-wide referendum where billions of beings voted to dissolve the old Galactic Council and replace it with human leadership. The voting results had been overwhelming. On world after world, populations that had integrated with human systems chose to formalize that relationship. Rigelian miners who had prospered under human management, voted for continued partnership. Proximan farmers, whose crops now fed dozens of systems, supported human agricultural oversight. Altarian scientists, whose research had advanced by centuries, wanted to maintain their collaboration with human laboratories. Even species that had initially resisted human influence found themselves outnumbered by their own citizens who had benefited from human integration. The Kovaxian Empire, despite their military defeat, saw 70% of their population vote in favor of joining the Federation. Their economy had recovered faster under human guidance than anyone had thought possible. Dr. Keck's tool approached the Chancellor's platform, carrying a stack of datapads containing reports from human exploration fleets operating beyond the galaxy's edge. His appointment as the Federation's chief xenoarchaeologist had been unanimous. His expertise in ancient civilizations made him invaluable for understanding newly discovered species. The deep space reconnaissance teams have identified several promising candidates, he reported, his voice carrying none of the alarm that had once characterized his warnings about human expansion. Over the past months, he had come to understand that resistance was not only futile but ultimately unnecessary. Gina accepted the reports and began reviewing the preliminary contact assessments. Each survey described a different alien species, with unique characteristics, technologies, and cultural patterns. But the approach would be identical to the strategy that had worked across the galaxy for thousands of years. The Andromedans show particular promise, she noted, studying detailed analyses of several civilizations in the neighboring galaxy. Their mathematical abilities exceed even our most advanced species, but they lack faster-than-light travel technology, perfect candidates for a mutually beneficial first contact. The ancient stone tablets that had once tried to warn the galaxy about human expansion now hung on the chamber walls as historical displays. Tourists from across the Federation visited to read about the civilizations that had encountered humanity. Throughout galactic history, the warnings were preserved not as prophecies of doom, but as testimonies to the success of human integration methods. Schoolchildren learned about the Zephyri, the Morthak, and the Kelvaxians as examples of species that had joined the growing human civilization and contributed their unique knowledge to the collective advancement of galactic society. Their cultures lived on, adapted and evolved, as part of something larger than any single species could achieve alone. The cycle was indeed continuing, but now it operated on an intergalactic scale. Human exploration vessels were already making contact with species in the Magellanic Clouds, while advanced scouts mapped potential targets in distant galactic clusters. The pattern would repeat endlessly: peaceful approach, gradual integration, mutual benefit, and eventual assimilation. What made the process so effective wasn't deception or force, but genuine improvement in living conditions for the species that joined humanity's expanding civilization. Crime rates dropped, economies flourished, technologies advanced, and conflicts between species diminished as they all became part of the same unified society. The galaxy's inhabitants had discovered something that the ancient warning tablets couldn't have predicted. Being conquered by humanity felt exactly like being saved by them. The integration process brought prosperity, security, and advancement that most species had never imagined possible. Standing in the chamber where the Galactic Council had once ruled over hundreds of independent species, Chancellor Gina looked out at representatives from thousands of worlds now united under human guidance. The ancient warnings had been correct about humanity's ultimate victory, but they had been wrong about one crucial detail. By the time anyone recognized what was happening, it wasn't too late. It was exactly the right time to embrace a better future for galactic civilization.